And I just want to recognize our planning team. So this workshop was done in coordination with the Division of Coastal Management's district planners, which includes Charlene Owens, who's in Elizabeth City, Rachel Love Adrick, who's in the Morehead City office, and Mike Christianberry from the Wilmington office. And then we also have our Coastal Reserve grant writing intern, Zofia Knorik, who is at UNCW as a PhD student, and she's developed all of the grant writing tips section in today and Tuesday's workshop. So we give Zofia a big thank you for that. She's put a lot of work into that. And then, of course, myself, I've been helping put these workshops together. I just want to let you know that all of the materials are online, and I want to point out a couple things. We've created these notepads for you. So when the funders are giving their interviews, we have this interview question notepad, and that's a Word document you can open. You can print it out and take notes on that, or you can type directly in that document. And then also we have a grant writing tips notepad. So when Zofia is talking about those grant writing tips that are sprinkled throughout the agenda, you can use this to take notes. Again, it's a Word document, so you can type in it or print it out and write on it. And then we also have some resources here. We'll be talking about this site plan later. There's this grant opportunities quick fact guide. There is a funding sources comparison chart. And then there's also this grant management tips document. So be sure to check those out. We've put a lot of work into developing those materials for you, and we just put the link to the workshop webpage in the chat box. Thank you, Zofia. All right, so let's review our objectives for today's workshop. We're going to learn things that make a grant proposal successful. We're going to learn about grant opportunities for communities to acquire land and make improvements to beach and waterfront access, parks, and boating facilities. We're going to learn how to leverage funding from multiple grant sources. And we're going to network with funding agencies as best as we can in this virtual environment to help inform grant proposal development. And I just want you to know that all of these grant funders who are speaking today are all just really nice people. They've been so generous with their time in putting this workshop together. So I would say do not hesitate to reach out to them if you have a question specific to your proposal. I'm sure they'll be happy to help you. So let's review our agenda today. So first, we're going to hear about the Recreational Trails Program from Scott Crocker with the North Carolina State Parks. Then we're going to have our first round of grant writing tips on organization tools and strategies. We'll hear about the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund from Brittany Shipp. She's with the Eastern Region Recreational Consultant. At 10:30, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and you know that time is, we're hoping it'll be right at 10:30, but it could be a little before, a little after, so just keep that in mind. Then we'll hear some more grant writing tips about leveraging funding. Also, that's getting scrappy. We'll learn more about that. And then we'll hear about the Boating Infrastructure Grant Program from Vicki Pereski with the North Carolina Division of Marine Fisheries. Grant writing tips, we're going to do breakout groups for this. Hopefully you did that homework that was listed on the website as well as in the email that I sent you. And we'll be reviewing a successful pre-proposal. And then our last funding presentation will be the North Carolina Pump Out Program from Pat Durrett with the North Carolina Clean Marina Program. And she is with the Division of Coastal Management. And we will get you out of here by 12 p.m. And with that, I just want to end on some funny jokes. I'll give you a minute to read those. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rachel Love Adrick, who is the district planner for the Morehead office for the Division of Coastal Management. And she is going to interview our first funder, Scott Crocker with the North Carolina State Parks, about the Recreational Trails Program. So over to you, Rachel and Scott.
Good morning, everyone. Scott, are you here? I didn't see you.
I am.
Perfect. Okay.
Hopefully you can hear me. We didn't check my audio, so hopefully it sounds okay.
I can check. I hear you. Excellent. All right. I'm going to go through these questions with you. So your program is the North Carolina, the Recreational Trails Program. What kind of projects do you fund, and can you share an example?
Sure. So the answer is kind of in the name, recreational trails, but I'll expand on that a little bit. So we fund any kind of recreational trails project, equestrian, hiking, biking, mostly mountain biking, paddling, and off-highway vehicle use, recreational off-highway vehicle use, which is essentially four-wheeling, is what people would think of that as. We do types of projects we do are new trail construction, trail renovation, building trail facilities, trail tools, land acquisition for trail projects. And you can have some planning and permitting, but it can only be 10% of your project cost for our programs. And I kind of listed them in order that is preferred by our Trails Committee.
Okay.
As far as an example project, I thought of a couple coastal ones. There's actually one in the Coastal Reserve up in Kitty Hawk that got funded this year. That is a little connector trail that will connect a hard-to-use part of the reserve up there to a public parking lot, and that will allow a lot more use of that trail that normally is pretty much a neighborhood trail up in that area. And that's somewhere I used to work. But also there's a new mountain bike trail system that's being built in Jacksonville, just outside of Jacksonville. And so this project is going to be fully funded by RTP, it looks like.
Excellent. So where does the funding come from for your program?
Okay. It's a Federal Highway Trust Fund, which is to explain that a little bit further. There's excise tax that comes from, all of our gas is taxed, but a portion of that fuel is used in recreational off-highway use. So you're paying highway use tax on that fuel. So there's a formula to figure out roughly how much of that is actually going to off-highway use, and that's where all of our funding comes from.
How much funding is available each year?
About $1.4 million for projects, and you can go up to $100,000 in your project for this coming cycle. That can vary, so check each year on what the funding cap is. And we have about $89,000 for safety and education projects or safety and education workshops and that sort of thing. Something I didn't mention in what we fund, but we also do some small projects, and that could be up to $5,000 for safety and education.
So is that a workshop that the community could put on then?
It is. A lot of times it's used for speaker fees, to get a good keynote speaker to come, and then they'll find other sources for other things. It can be used for educational materials, potentially exhibits and that sort of thing at your trailhead.
Okay. So who is eligible for this grant?
Government agencies, to break it down real simply, government agencies and registered nonprofits. The caveat there is it all needs to be publicly accessible. It couldn't be like conservation land that there's a lot of plant conservation land. We wouldn't want to build a trail system somewhere that, you can't get the public to. So the general public has to be able to access it. Another good example of what might not be the best fit would be a military base where the general public can't access it.
Okay. Can you briefly describe your RFP and any elements that are expected in the proposal?
Sure. Well, I'll kind of sidestep this one a little bit by saying everything's on our website at trails.nc.gov. And there's really good breakdown on the process. So to give you a very brief explanation, though, we have a grant management system. That's an online grant management system. And a lot of grants in North Carolina are going to this system. We have our application on there now. On our website, we do have step-by-step instructions. We're updating those right now to go with our current cycle that we're expecting for this year. But to tell you a little bit about the process, essentially, we're not having a pre-app anymore. We are just doing a final app where all the elements are represented. So you need to have your budgets figured out. You need to have your maps figured out, and you'll have a chance to change those once we review them. But I'm kind of jumping ahead to a little more of the detail.
That's okay. So what is one of or something you would highlight that is one of the most important aspects of your application? Yeah,
this is my favorite question that y'all have, because it gives me a chance to tell you what we're really looking for. Mm-hmm. I'd say the most important thing you can spend your time on is your budget and your maps. Your maps, you should be able to look at the project-specific map. We require an overview map, an environmental map, and a project-specific map. And the project-specific map should be your kind of the one that you can just show anybody on the street pretty much, and they will understand what you're trying to accomplish with the RTP funding. And we have regional trail specialists that will help you out. You should definitely contact them to help them, to have them help you. But the map should tell you at a glance exactly what you're going to do. And then if I look at your budget, I should see in the budget everything you highlighted in the map that we're building, that you're going to be building. I should see in that budget all those elements represented. If there's a bridge on the project, that is something that hangs a lot of people up. So if you have a 40-foot bridge and I see that you've got $5,000 allocated for it, I know there's going to be a problem with your project, because there's no way you can build a bridge of that size for that money. And I'd say the other most important thing that you could do is follow the instructions. We have very specific instructions on how to upload your attachments and how to bundle your attachments. So all these projects are reviewed by a trail committee, and if they go into the online system and you've got 40 attachments that are part of your supporting documentation, then it's going to be really frustrating for them to review your project. So we have instructions on how to bundle everything into packages, how to order them in priority order, and make it easy for it to be reviewed.
Yeah, you always got to be thinking about your reviewer. Who's reviewing?
Absolutely. They're the ones that make the decisions.
Yep. So are there any matching requirements or limits on matching with your program?
There are. Basically, there's a 25% match. So if you ask for $100,000, you need to have 25% that you can supply and match. The limitations are, there's a lot of different ways you can achieve the match through forced labor, volunteer, just, straight, costs. You're just paying out of pocket for part of the project, but they have to be a non-federal highway match. So it has to be a non-federal highway source. That's the main limitation.
So you could use another state grant to match your funds?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any insights on, since I brought up leveraging, do you have any insights on leveraging money from multiple grant sources, or an example of someone who's done that in the past?
Yeah, I'll kind of share an example of what not to do, or what to do if you do it the right way. One thing that's important is if you are leveraging other sources in your supporting documentation or somewhere in the grant, the body, the content of your or different questions that we ask, you need to explain that you've either secured the funding or you're still seeking the funding. Just be honest on that part. Primarily, if you're trying to leverage other funds, you really want to make sure you've got that funding secured, ideally. We often, because we're a $100,000 project or a $100,000 maximum, a lot of times we're part of, say, a greenway. And, greenways, you don't get very far for $100,000, but you can build a pretty nice bridge for $100,000. So, for instance, if we're part of a greenway project and we're going to be paying for a bridge, the committee should feel confident that the rest of the project is going to get built. Hopefully the other funding is secured and we're just coming in to build that, maybe a key element, a $100,000 bridge that's going to get across a creek or something like that. So that's the best thing I could say, is try to explain that the other sources are secure, or hopefully you've got some pretty positive leads on other funding. Okay.
And what is the RFP, the timing? Like when are your applications due?
So right now we're getting the dates together, the final dates together, and again on our website trails.nc.gov. Those dates will be up soon. We've got a nice on our grant page. We've got a nice calendar that's going to break down when all the deadlines you need to keep in mind are. But generally, the way the process is, it'll be open very soon. We just have to open up the application for the public. You need to register for the GMS, your grant management system. You need to have a login for that. That'll get you access to start an application. But in general, the way it works is it'll be open now. We have a soft deadline that is in July. And that is a deadline that if you make that deadline, we will, as a team, we will get the whole Trails program together, review your application, and give you very straightforward feedback. We'll try to help you really craft it. In the past, we had a pre-app that didn't have your budget, and you really need to see the budget. We really need everybody to go through that process just to save you some time if you're not really competitive, or let us try to find the holes in your project. Then we have once we give you the feedback, there's another deadline in September, and it'll be reviewed by the committee in November, and awards will go out in December.
Okay. Well, you already answered my next question. There's no pre-app and final app. You just moved to one application. Mm-hmm. So has COVID impacted your funding allocation or any other aspects of your program?
No, it has not our funding. We haven't had any problems with our funding. If anything, COVID has highlighted the importance of trails, and there's been other sources of funding that have come to state parks that we've been able to utilize. And another part of my job is I actually run the trails program in addition to supervising this grant program. So COVID has been, for lack of a better word, good to us, other than the, massive visitation and everything else that's happening in state parks. But it has impacted our ability to travel. Everybody's working from home now, and trying to travel around the state to do inspections for trail projects and that sort of thing has been a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I know site visits have been challenging on my end too. So do you guys acquire any land?
We do. We allow that to be something you can apply for. They generally don't score as well. And we have some information on our website that kind of breaks down. It shows what projects, the scores that you get for various types of projects. So that's a helpful document to look at to see how you might compete. But land acquisition is allowed, but we don't see a lot of it, especially because of our maximum amount, $100,000 can't buy, a terrible amount of land. A lot of times it could buy an easement or maybe a critical little parcel, but it can't go very far.
So if they did purchase land, are there any kind of limitations on development or deed restrictions?
It needs to be trail related, of course, just that's one requirement, but it needs to be accessible to the public. So it can't suddenly close off to the general public. Be available to the public right after the application, and you get the money, and then you shut it down. It has to remain open to the public.
Remain open.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if there's anyone to contact for help, would you mind putting that information in the chat box for everyone? There you go. Sure.
There's a link right there. That's for the whole staff. So I'm assuming a lot of folks here today are going to be from the coast. Mm-hmm. I'm currently in Beaufort right now myself, so my heart is close to the coast. But we also have other program staff that work in the Piedmont and the mountain region. But Bob Tabor is your coastal trail specialist, and I'll put his phone number in the chat box as well. Right after we get done here.
Okay. So now we're going to look at this site plan and kind of look and see what you could fund on this site plan. So Whitney, could you pull that up for me?
Yes. Give me just a moment.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I've pulled it up and I'm looking at it as well.
So while Whitney's pulling it up, I'm going to go ahead and kind of read the scenario for this project. It's a 4.4 acre site adjacent to the downtown along a river that has become available for purchase. The site has approximately 450 linear feet of shoreline. It's vegetated with lawn grasses, except there's a half acre of freshland wetlands along the western property line. The river at this location is designated as a Blueway Trail. The trail has kayak launch facilities and permanent camping platforms along the river east and west of the site. The site is located about 5 miles upstream from a major boating waterway. The town desires to utilize the site as a waterfront gateway to downtown with accessible amenities for all age groups. And the town has worked up this concept plan indicating the desired improvements. So with this site plan, we're trying to understand where everyone's funding fits in. So if you can go ahead and, based on your program, what would you be able to fund?
Sure. Yeah, I think this is a great way for to really kind of highlight where everybody fits in. So kudos to y'all for coming up with this. So for our project or our program, the projects that might look good as a part of this would be the kayak launch. If say you had a good funding set up for the rest of this project, but you needed, $80 or $100,000 to get that kayak launch built, that would be really a good use of RTP funds. We don't do a lot of paddle trails right now. And, in the coast, it's a lot of boardwalks and paddling is a lot of the recreation that's happening when you're talking about recreational trails. So
excuse the interruption. You have 5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I will not take 5 minutes to answer this. So yeah, the kayak launch, I'd say the boardwalk along these are allowable uses, I'm going to say. But the boardwalk would be a good fit. The picnic shelters could all be part of it. Even the concrete walkways would fit in. Potentially the boat trailer parking lot, or if there was kayak parking and that sort of thing. Any other facilities, if you built anything along the boat ramp to, set your kayak on, or anything along those lines, any types of facilities like that would be allowable. But I think the best use of the funds and the ones that would score the best with the committee would be the boardwalk and the kayak launch. And the pier would be an extension, essentially viewed as an extension of really the boardwalk. So that would fall in there as well. One thing that I'll caution everyone about is one thing we cannot do is we cannot fund sidewalks. So I say that, so immediately you think, okay, well, that concrete walkway is out. Well, that's not really a sidewalk. We're gonna look at that as a paved trail, essentially. What is not allowed is essentially if you have a curb that goes right up on a sidewalk in a city street or anywhere downtown or something along those lines, we cannot fund sidewalks. So if you have a concrete walkway, I'd urge you to use that term and don't say there are sidewalks that meander through the property and end up at the fishing pier, because then that's a key word that we have to get you to change, because we cannot fund sidewalks.
The language is important.
Language is important. That is why it is hugely important to work with your regional trail specialist. We often see things like this, and in working with your regional trail specialist, you're going to get the feedback like I'm giving you that says, you know what, I saw your budget and you're showing all the other parts of this project, but I really urge you to put the RTP funding beside the boardwalk and the kayak launch, and the other parts of this project overall can be on a budget that you're showing that you're going to complete, how you're going to complete this whole project, but they might make recommendations to shift your line items for RTP funding to be more competitive.
Excellent. I think this scenario is going to be very beneficial for everyone to understand who funds what.
Yeah, I definitely see where it would fit in with other people that are going to be presenting, the other programs that are going to be presenting, and it really makes sense with the leveraging question, how you can take multiple grant sources to achieve a project like this.
Well, good. We're achieving our goal then. There's a few questions in the chat box.
Okay.
Well, looks like one got answered. Is a community multi-use path considered a trail?
Yes. If it's, are we talking about as long as it's not a private community, yeah, that would be considered a trail. So greenways, multi-use paths, and we actually have funding sources that we want to use multi-use paths. We have diverse use paths that are part of some of our required funding. We're required to put 30% toward OHV, but we're also required to have some of our funding go toward diverse use paths. And to be diverse use, it only has to be like hike, bike, and that sort of thing. But a multi-use path in a community absolutely would be considered a trail.
Okay. And the last one I see is, do you fund projects due to hurricane damage? This person says they have a pier that was damaged due to Isaias.
Yeah, I would say that's possible. Just a pier standing alone by itself wouldn't be, to be frank, wouldn't be super competitive. If it's essentially, we would consider that a boardwalk. But if it's just repairing a pier, that would be essentially trail renovation or repair. But the committee has to look at trying to get the most bang for its buck, and trying to look at all the projects. So if you could get 5 miles of dirt trail versus repairing a pier, it would be less competitive. And we have a lot of new trail projects that come online, but it absolutely would be possible. That would be possible. And I think I saw a question about the Blue Way. Was that answered by somebody?
I think they said you answered it in your question. Okay. But the question is, can RTP funds go toward Blue Way trails on the water, thinking paddle trail development funding?
Absolutely. And the way you want to kind of show that, and it would be a really good thing to show in one of your maps, would be what does the paddle trail look like, especially on the coast where it's in the marsh. Most of the paddle trail projects are just a parking lot and a dock or a pier. So that standing by itself doesn't say a lot. It doesn't really tell the story. So tell the story with your maps, show what the paddle trail looks like, and then show how that parking lot is critical, or that launch is critical to accessing the paddle trail as a whole.
Perfect. Well, I think that is the last question I see in the chat box, so I'm going to turn it back over to Whitney. Thank you, Scott.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel and Scott. That was great. Now I'm going to turn it over to Sophia, who's going to go through our first grant writing tips section.
Yeah. Hey, good morning, everybody. So we're going to zoom out a little bit, or take a step back and think about like the preparation that goes into writing a grant before you even get started. And so I would welcome everybody to share in the chat box what your favorite tools or strategies are to use when you're writing to keep your workflow streamlined and organized. So this doesn't even have to be about grant writing specifically. It can just be writing in general. So I'll give everybody about 30 seconds to start sharing. And while we're waiting for those 30 seconds, I think the most important thing you can do for yourself is to give yourself time. So as we're thinking about what goes into writing a grant proposal specifically, 80%, approximately 80% of the time that you spend is in the preparation phase, right? And then only 20% is actually spent, doing the clickety-clacking writing. And the reason for that is because you want to set yourself up for success, to have a clear plan of attack and runway, and then you can sort of take off with a nice smooth trip. Okay. Nobody's sharing anything in the box, so I'm just going to keep going, but I do encourage you. Oh, perfect. Okay. Melissa says, I start with a list of bullet points and get everything I can on paper without trying to organize. Nice. So do a brain dump. And then she goes back and creates an outline. Perfect. Timeline with an Excel spreadsheet. Great. Thank you, Jay Powell, for sharing. Michael Flynn says, write out questions to answer and then delete the questions. I'm interested in that, Michael, in terms of what you mean by deleting the questions, maybe after you've answered them. Right, like James Baldwin or Ernest Hemingway, don't use two words with one will do. Perfect. Okay, Michael confirms that that's what he was talking about. Amazing. Yeah, so I'm seeing a lot of great strategies, one of which is making an outline. Have an information gathering phase first. Yep. Breaking the application down by sections, working through the app section by section. Perfect. So I'm seeing a lot of like outlines. Make sure you get sort of all your thoughts down on paper. And then you can go ahead and reorder them. I think that's great. Yeah, Lisa also says an outline. Okay, great. So I think outlines are amazing. But before even the outline begins, or before you even decided to apply for a grant, you have to do some internal reflection on what your organization's capacities are before seeking funding. So you want to have a good sense of self-awareness. Okay, Shone says have a brainstorming session with all relevant staff. I think that's also really relevant because I have on the list other people. So soliciting early feedback from especially end users. So in this case, it would be community members, right? So does the project that you want to apply for funding, does that actually help accomplish the goal? And then, Tom, I think it sounds like you were, or Shom, I'm sorry. It sounds like you were saying you want to have early conversations with your colleagues and collaborators as well. Perfect. Okay. Create a narrative of the vision, Stacy says. Call to the funder to discuss potential projects and see if it's a good fit. Yeah, that is a great recommendation from Jay Powell. So that's another person that you can solicit early feedback from because, right, establishing that you are eligible and that this would be a good fit for the program at the outset is going to save you hours and hours of time, right? If you don't have that conversation initially and you like put in hours of work to preparing something that you can't even apply for, that's not helpful. Contact your RTS to bounce the conceptual plans for a trail project and get an idea from rough costs. Yeah, perfect. Okay, let's see. How about, so in the time of COVID, I'm interested in how y'all have transitioned your workflow to like group work in this digital age, right? So I'm thinking like, I really like using Google Docs. I know Microsoft Office has sort of their own platform and series of software that you can share through the cloud really easily. But I would, at the outset, again, and people have kind of alluded to this, just make sure with your team that it's very clear what everybody's established roles and expectations are. And that, again, is just another tool to help the workflow move a little bit easier. Okay, so to circle back to the internal capacities and needs of your organization, that self-awareness, I want to sort of introduce the concept of leveraging because that's what our next topic is. And we've sort of already talked about it, so I want to just make it really explicit. So Scott was mentioning how his funding pool can be used for certain things and not for other things, but it requires match, right? So leveraging grant funding is all about piecing together all of the different funds for your big project, right? And that can take a lot of different forms, as Scott said, in terms of volunteer time. It could be you've secured funds already, and you can say in another application, I already have these funds, etc. So hopefully that makes that really clear in case somebody didn't know what leveraging was and was like, oh my gosh, what are you talking about at the beginning? Okay. Time, self-awareness. Okay, your eyes. Sorry, this one's huge. So read the request for proposals, the RFP, like from cover to cover before you start, because chances are if you have a question about the application, it'll be answered in there. And then you can demonstrate to the grant manager, the program manager, that you've read the RFP by asking really specific questions that are clarifying. And in those specific questions, it could be, does my project idea sound like a good fit for your program? And I want to reiterate that program managers are very nice, and they're always really enthusiastic about people reaching out to them and wanting to know if their project idea is a good fit for their program, right? So see the program manager as sort of a collaborator, somebody to bounce ideas off of, because if you're awarded the grant, they are going to be a collaborator of sorts, right? Okay, and then I just want to hit on one last thing in the last minute that I have, to go back to starting early and giving yourself time. So I have put together a successful grant proposal in as short of a week, but I do not recommend doing that by any stretch of the imagination. That was a terrible week for me about a year ago. Give yourself plenty of time. And I know that sometimes you don't have a lot of time depending on when the RFP is released and when the deadline is. But if it's a grant that you know sort of has a cycle of time, like it's released sort of in the summer every year, you can plan ahead, right? And you can be thinking in January, like, okay, we know that this is an annual fund, assuming COVID hasn't disrupted it. What's my calendar look like in terms of applying for grants this year? Has my organization changed? Has it grown? Has it evolved, et cetera? So sort of just doing that regular check-in can be another organization strategy. Okay, and that's my time.
Great. Thank you, Sophia. So next, we're going to have one more interview before we head to our 10-minute break. So Charlene Owens, who is the district planner for the Elizabeth City office for the Division of Coastal Management, is going to talk with Brittany Shipp. And Brittany is representing the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund. So over to Charlene and Brittany.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Brittany.
Good morning.
I'm going to start us off the first question. So, Brittany, what does your program fund? And you can share an example of a project.
Sure. So the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund does fund land acquisition projects, and we also fund park projects, trail projects, waterfront access, and any combination of all of the above. So it was interesting seeing the site plan because I think we can pretty much help with everything on there.
Oh, great, wonderful. So can you share an example project with us, something you've got in mind?
So this year we had 66 applications come in, 17 were awarded. So again, since we are mostly speaking with folks in the East, I'm the Eastern Region consultant to cover the 27 counties in the eastern part of the state. Bertie County this year was funded on a project, the Tall Glass of Water Project, if any of you are familiar. Elements in that project included improvements to the roadway to access the park itself, a swim beach along the Albemarle Sound, improvements to the walkway there, a kayak kiosk, some green space improvements to allow for passive recreation, as well as some parking, restrooms, showers, and primitive camping.
Awesome.
So that was a really exciting project this year.
Yes, we're also involved in that project. Where does your funding come from?
So our funding currently comes from the General Assembly, so it is budgeted funding.
Okay, and how much is available?
It varies year to year, obviously, since it is budgeted. This year, we were able to award $5.2 million. So we'll see what we have going into this upcoming cycle.
So who is eligible to apply for your funding?
So local government agencies, so incorporated towns, cities, and county government agencies are eligible to apply.
Great. If you would briefly describe your RFP and the elements that are expected in a proposal, maybe highlight what you feel are the most important aspects of an application.
So as far as request for proposal with the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund, it is simply an application process. So the application announcement typically goes out in the fall shortly after the previous year awards have been made. And then there's also an instructional video that goes online. It used to be a workshop. We've gone to a video format so folks can go on there and watch that to answer some of the questions they may have going through the application. And then in April, there's 4 regional consultants. We all accept applications for review or any of the elements within them up until about April. And this year's grant deadline for 2021 will be May 3rd. Following that, it's usually late summer, early fall, so the August timeframe that the applications are actually awarded.
Mm-hmm. And could you touch on, again, the elements that are expected in a proposal?
So there's a variety of elements. So the biggest things we find are the description and justification that goes into the application. There's a 9-member Parks and Recreation Trust Fund Authority Board that essentially ends up selecting the applications based on a variety of criteria. What they get will be the site plan, the project cost, as well as description and justification. So you really want to focus on telling your story. You've got one page to put in front of them to really explain the importance of your project. Public input is really big. Planning is really big. There are opportunities for site-specific master plans as well as comprehensive master plans that are reviewed by our staff when developing the score. Mm-hmm. So those are certainly very important elements as they pertain to this program. But being able to show that the public has been involved, that there is public support, that there's a need, recreational needs survey is another element that's in there. So those are a lot of the things we try to highlight when folks are looking to apply.
Great. So are there match requirements? Any limits on matching?
So it is a dollar for dollar program. So, spend $1 and get reimbursed $1. And there is a $500,000 grant maximum. So the funds will not be awarded over $500,000. As far as matching is concerned, there is an opportunity for what we have is donated value. So if a property is donated, we always stress to folks, and can't stress it enough, if you have an opportunity to have land donated, or even at a bargain sale, if it appraises higher than what the seller is selling it to you for, please don't accept it. Don't convey it to the town or county until you talk to us if you think you're going to be applying for Parks Recreation Trust Fund monies, because you can use those donated value dollars as your match.
Right. That's great information to know. Do you have any insight on leveraging money from multiple grant sources? Maybe your grant program having been leveraged on some projects?
Yeah. So we do allow matching of other state and federal funds in this program. So, I always also think it's big to speak to the fact of, finding what your project is, really honing in on what the needs for your project are as far as your scope and your elements, and then seeking out the grant funds that are applicable to that instead of going the opposite direction. Don't find a grant and then figure out a way to make your project work for that one. Mm-hmm. I think we all know right now funds are tight across the board when it comes to grants. So just really make sure and apply for what your needs are and where they're most applicable to the grant. Apply for those. So, but yeah, we do allow, other grant funds to be matches.
Right. Great. Thank you. You've already talked about your application process. Just to clarify, do you have a pre-app process, or is this just a one-app process?
It is just a one application process.
Okay. Has COVID impacted your funding allocation or other aspects of your program?
I would say as far as the pandemic, the main thing, because of the public input requirements, or that being a part of the application scoring system, obviously people have had to get very creative in ways that they're holding these public input meetings. So we've seen some very innovative Facebook Lives and, videos with surveys along with them, things like that. But I would say that's kind of one of the biggest things we've seen. And then, of course, with budget freezing and, capital projects being taken off the table, things like that, I think more from the actual local governments, we're seeing maybe some difficulty with having those matching funds from their local government budget.
Sure. So you touched on that you do have money for land acquisition.
Yes.
Do you have any limitations on the types of development that can occur on those properties?
So, it's kind of the same thing as Mr. Crocker was saying. It has to be for public use. We do not fund equipment per se. So yes, we'll construct the basketball court and the goals and all that, but we're not going to provide the racks and the basketballs and, things of that nature. So those would kind of be the limitations, but, and it does have to be, the site has to be under complete site control by the applicant. So, you can't apply for a project on property that is not owned by the local government agency.
Sure. So, Whitney, if you would pull up that concept plan, we've already talked about the scenario, so I'm not going to go over that again. But once we get the site plan, if you could tell us how your grant might fit into the puzzle of being able to fund some of the elements and even an acquisition for this project.
Sure. So if it was, available for acquisition, that would certainly be something that could also be included. We do allow for acquisition and development on projects. Or if it was already acquired, then you could just move forward with the development portion of it. We do, utilities, amenities, all of that is something that's included. So the signage, the furnishing, and all that would be eligible. Obviously, there is an aspect of wanting to fund things that are available for public use, more so, if a project comes in and you've got $350,000 worth of utilities, wetland restoration, parking lot, things of that nature. And then $50,000 for your fish and pier, picnic shelter, things where the public can actually utilize them. The project may not be as appealing for funding as if you're really having those strong public access components to it.
Sure. So maybe looking at this plan, what on here may be less competitive? Maybe that's the question I need to ask, because it sounds like a lot of this can be funded through your program.
It can. I mean, they're all eligible items. There are planning costs are limited to 20% of the total project cost and or $200,000, whichever is less. So that's something to consider as well. But yeah, I mean, again, I think showing, the community input, whatever there's the strongest need for. So, kayak launch, the transient dock, fish and pier, things like that folks can really get out and use certainly makes for a competitive project.
All right, great. So who do we contact for more help or information from your program?
So again, we have 4 consultants across, and I'll post in the chat box the link to the Recreation Resources website so that you guys can see. I think, again, everybody's probably more eastern part, but we do have the west, central east, and east are the way we're divided out. So I will post that in there, and you all can check it out.
Great. So Whitney, do we have any questions in the chat?
Yes. Tom asks, can a feasibility design study be funded through the trust fund?
So we don't fund more like the actual planning of the project, so to speak. So like master plans and things, components that are required are not eligible project cost. So the actual construction management and things like that are eligible so long as they are included in the project budget.
I don't see any more questions in the chat, but if questions come to mind, please put them in there. And even if they come to mind later after Brittany's done, we can get answers for you.
Brittany, if I can, since we've got a little bit of time, do you have any grant management tips for people that receive a grant? You get the money, now what?
So I say the biggest thing is finding out a way to organize your receipts, your invoices, and all of that. Going ahead as you're getting those in, for our grant, your project costs are your elements, the way that you submit it. So, creating a filing system that you've already got your stuff organized by what the project element is, how you put it in your budget, so that when it comes time to do your reimbursement, it's all right there, ready to go.
Great. Any other questions that we might have for Brittany?
We do have some words of wisdom in the chat box from Scott Crocker. He says, when leveraging multiple sources of funding, I think it's best if each part of a large project you are seeking funding for to stand alone if you are only receiving awards for portions of the larger project. Then other funds can be sought to complete the project. Often large projects are completed in phases due to small max amounts for the RTP funding, but each completed phase is useful on its own.
Great. Thank you, Brittany. Thank you, Whitney.
Thank you all so much.
All right. Thank you both. We're going to pick it up again, and I'm going to turn it back over to Sophia for our next round of grant writing tips.
Hey, everybody. So actually, Whitney, if you have the opportunity, if you could pull up that second poll, that would be sweet. Okay, this is probably going to look a little familiar because we accidentally got it up at the beginning, but the poll says, describe your familiarity with leveraging grant funding. I've leveraged multiple funding sources before and feel confident in my ability to do so. I've leveraged funding before, but want some inspiration for other creative opportunities for leveraging in the future. That's on there twice. So we'll, B and C. You can choose either one and we'll just add them together. D, I understand the concept of leveraging, but I'm a total newbie. Tell me more. And E, I have no idea what you're talking about. Hopefully, between the little introduction and just sort of talking about it, we will have few E's, but that's okay if you still don't know what we're talking about. It means I didn't do a very good job of explaining it more than anything.
Sorry about the double question there. I should have paid more attention when reading the polls.
I didn't notice it until I started reading it. So it's okay.
So we have about 44% have completed the poll. So we'll give you another few seconds here to finish it up. And
then maybe while folks are finishing up, can you bring up the Cure Beach slide?
Oh, yeah. Let's see. That's going to take me a moment because I didn't realize we were going to share that. So just give me a minute.
Oh, sorry. It's in folks' notes for reference in the Access Workshop Notepad. So no rush. If you want to share the poll results, we can work on getting that up in a second.
Okay. And you should see the poll results.
Can anyone else see them? I cannot see them.
Oh.
There it is. Okay, cool.
Sorry about
that. So it looks like, looks like some people understand, some people are looking for creativity, and then a few of you feel like you really know what you're doing. That's awesome. That's good that we have a good mix. Okay, so basically, there's still a couple people who don't understand what leveraging is, so let's start there. So Scott, several people have sort of inferred already, but say we have like a big project like the site plan that Charlene put together and Whitney's been showing. You might be able to think about that as different phases or as those separate items as being, Lisa says she has no idea. Okay, cool. Well, hopefully you'll have some good understanding of it by the time you leave here today. Okay, so you can think of sort of a big project as sort of having multiple phases or components, right? And you might decide whether it's phases or components sort of at the outset. So phases sort of implies that there's development over time. Components sort of implies that you have these different Tetris pieces and you're trying to figure out how to assemble them. Whitney is working on getting up a slide of an example of a completed project, Cure Beach Oceanfront Park. And it looks like there were 5 separate major funding sources that they got funding from. And so what's important in terms of how to piece money together is thinking about the requirements for each program. Perfect. Okay. So this beautiful oceanfront park, and I'm not sure what the sort of subdivision, what funding purchased what, or what funding funded what element, but I'll just make it up. So $600,000 from public access, maybe that funded sort of the bathroom and the drain field. Maybe Part S funded the gazebos and the playground. Park Bond probably purchased or acquired the land, and so on. So the way that you can sort of think about leveraging funding is starting with who funds what, right? So we're sort of getting that information out now via these interviews, but start with the restrictions on what can and cannot be funded for each grant. And then you can sort of, I think of it as like storyboarding a project. So for my dissertation, I would be like, okay, I have these 4 different projects that need funding and I need to pay myself. So I have a grant that pays me, and then I have other funding pieced together that funded each of the individual research projects. You can think of the same thing here. You have a big project. There are limited funding sources, and each of those funding sources has limited funds. And so it's really about getting scrappy and piecing funds together to make your amazing project vision come to fruition. Okay. So think about what each program funds, what the scale of the project is feasible. Oh, perfect. And then Rachel has included in the chat a breakdown of the different funding. Okay. So what is the scale of the project and what is feasible? And then how much will any X number of dollars, whatever the program ceiling is. How much will that get you, and what are the parameters? So knowing that at the outset is really important. Another really important thing is when you're budgeting for materials, because most of this is sort of in the budget department of the grand schematic of grant writing, use as specific costs as possible. Don't just make numbers up. This is really, really important because you don't want to allocate funds in one application and then have that not be accurate for when you're trying to match funds or piece together funding elsewhere. It's really important to be honest and just maintain your integrity when you're in this space. Okay, Ashley says, I would definitely say make sure your budget is well thought out and realistic. Think of all the hurdles and compensate early. Have multiple scenarios that include full funding, partial funding, and how your project would change according to each scenario, especially if you're leveraging multiple sources, but even with one funding source can sometimes only be able to issue a partial award, and it helps to mention the possibility in the application. Oh, Curie. Thank you, Melissa. Okay, so yeah, I think Ashley brings up a really great point, and that's sort of what I'm thinking about the storyboarding, right? You can have multiple scenarios and then the outcomes of those scenarios and how they might relate to everything else. I sometimes do this on a whiteboard. Some people might do this in an Excel sheet. Some people might do it in like Paint. I don't know. There are lots of different ways to be thinking about it. Okay. Another comment says, play equipment, if acquired, are there funding for insurance liability? Is that a question or no? Like, are you looking for clarification from some of our funding managers? Okay, cool. Yeah, maybe that's a question. If like Scott or Brittany want to come off mute and answer Ernell's question, because I don't know the answer to that question. I think it's a really good one, though.
I'll jump in. No, I don't think I've ever seen that broken out as asking for funding as part of the project for insurance. So I would say not for us. Never seen that.
So Brittany had to jump off. And I guess it's an overall, not if the grant's going to fund the liability, but would the town need to have liability insurance, I think, if you're asking for funding for play equipment? And that's a good question.
Yeah, that would be a good one for Brittany, because we typically don't, it's not that it's not allowed, but we typically don't fund those types of things. But there is protection for anybody that has public use. I am blanking on the wording of it, but if you allow public use on trails and that sort of thing, there is essentially protection for you do not owe the visitor any more protection than you would owe a trespasser on the property. Is essentially the breakdown of it. So you're protected by. I'll find it and I'll put it in the chat when I get off of here.
Thanks, Scott.
Cool. Thanks, Scott. Okay, cool. Oh, you see children's equipment on the slide. Okay, yeah, I think that's a really good clarifying question. And thank you for bringing it up. But that is the end of my 10 minutes. So I'm going to turn it back over to Whitney. And feel free, y'all, if you have more questions about leveraging, you can put it in the chat and we can follow back up. We're going to save the chat. So feel free to use that as a question.
Thanks, Sophia. And Chad did say in the chat box, we did not have to provide proof of liability insurance when we applied for the PARTIF grant. So that's good to know. And we'll also pose that question to Brittany offline, and we'll provide you all with some follow-up documents, including contact information for all of the funders and chat box answers and those sorts of things. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Christianberry, who is the district planner for the Division of Coastal Management in the Wilmington office. And he will be interviewing Vicki Poreski from the North Carolina Division of Marine Fisheries, and she will be talking about the Boating Infrastructure Grant Program.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Vicki. Is Vicki there?
Vicki, are you muted?
How about now?
There you go.
Okay, yep, I was muted. So I am AKA Mom. Yeah.
Well, good to see you. I hope everyone's good.
Yeah, everybody. Okay.
All right, so I guess I'm going to go down the list of questions too, the same ones that we've been sort of asking all morning.
Okay.
So for your purposes, for the big program, what types of projects do you fund, and where does your funding come from, and can you share with us a good example?
Okay, the Boating Infrastructure Grant Program is pretty specific to funding projects that are transient boating related. This can include different types of infrastructure, from structures, equipment, accessories, anything that would be necessary or desirable for a transient boating facility, for a transient vessel facility. The term transient is defined for the purposes of this program as vessels 26 feet larger. So, and it's very limited in the way that these transient vessels are, they can only be at a facility 15 days or less. So those are some things that are very specific about the program. Our funding comes from the Sport Fish Restoration and Boating Program, Boating Trust Fund, and that consists of excise taxes on fishing equipment, motorboat and small engine, fuels, import duties, interest that is incurred on the fund. So that's where the funding comes from. A recent example of a project that was a really good project, and one that was just completed, pretty clean project, was a marina that installed fuel pumps. And the marina was like 99% transient, beautiful marina, and the fuel pumps are really going to do a great service for the community and the marina. The fuel pumps will, so for the transient vessels coming through. But that was our most recent one that was funded.
Okay. So that's good to know about the 26 feet or above, too.
Yeah.
I know we've had some discussions in the past about the differences between transient dockage and, let's say, just a day dock, or, where someone can pull up for just, a few hours at a time. And so there is a definite distinction there between the two.
Yeah, that distinction, and we're pretty clear that these have to be dedicated docks when we're funding for docks. They have to be dedicated for transients. So,
well, how much money do you have available each year, and who is eligible to apply for your funds?
Okay, we have two tiers that people can apply for. Our Tier 1 projects will fund up to $200,000. And then we have our Tier 2 projects, our Tier 2 funding, which will fund up to $1.5 million. Now, the $200,000, that funding is allocated to the state. Marine Fisheries is the liaison between the applicants and the federal grant people. So this funding, the $200,000, is for the whole state. So if we have 5 applicants and they're each asking for $200,000, we only have one $200,000 available. We wouldn't have $100,000 available. So, and then the $1.5 million is kind of interesting. That funding is on a national competition. So anybody that applies for a grant more than $200,000 goes through the same review process as the Tier 1. However, it would then go to a national competition. So those are the two major differences in those two funding.
Well, can you briefly describe your RFP, or I guess your application, and the elements that were expected in your proposals, and maybe highlight what what you feel may be most important in terms of the aspects of the application itself.
Okay, and I didn't get to who can apply for these funds. It has to be a publicly owned facility, of course, publicly owned. It can be a privately owned facility, but it has to be open to the public. They have to be in North Carolina. People that can apply are local marinas, or private marinas, local municipalities, state agencies, non-governmental entities. Again, we act as the liaison between the applicant and the federal funding source. Our RFP, the purpose of it is when we release our RFP, the main purpose is to give people an idea of if their project is eligible, some of the requirements that we require to fund these projects. And it also includes different resources and information to assist with writing the proposal. Some of the elements that we require within the RFP are, some of the things that are included is the program eligibility, where we try to make that very clear on who is eligible. Some of the other things that are included are the deadlines, ranking information, award information. The elements that we require in these projects are a project summary, project statement, budget narrative, geographic location maps, supporting documents, and each of these elements is very specific on what is required for the contents of those elements. So when I say a budget narrative, we will put in the RFP what we expect to see in the budget narrative, different elements of the narrative itself.
Okay. Are there, do you have any match requirements or match limitations?
We do. There's a 25% match required. There's no limitations on it. But what is very important, especially for the tier 2 projects that go to the national competition, part of the ranking is the amount of match offered. So 25% on a tier 2 project is probably not going to rank really high in a national competition. We typically see much higher, 30 to 50% on a tier 2 project. On a tier 1 project, the 25%, that's typically, what we see. That's the required amount. Mm-hmm. And what's really important about the match is we see a lot of people that get confused on it. Say they're putting in boat docks and they want to put in a parking lot at this marina, the parking lot is not eligible, so therefore it can't be used for match. Even though it may be one project, we have a lot of applicants that want to use their parking lot money, say, for match. But if it's not eligible to be funded by the feds under the program, then it's not eligible for match.
Sure.
So
all right. What's your last name, Eileen?
What is my last name? Excuse me?
I think we're having some feedback issues with someone, so disregard that.
I was going to say it's Mom Pereski. Yeah. Gotta have some fun with that. Like I said, surely this isn't saying Mom. I love it.
Okay, well, do you have any insights on leveraging money from multiple grants? And has your grant program been used to leverage money with other resources and other grants?
Yeah, I think it's been used in the past. It hasn't in quite a while. I think part of the reason for that is just because you have to be very careful on the different funding sources that are used for leveraging. So I have not seen it in the years that I've been doing this, and it's only a few years. I have not seen it, but I think we've used it in the past. I really can't say other than what we've seen here. People have had some great tips on leveraging funds, but I can't say anything that I've seen personally. So.
Yeah, I think leveraging is something that sort of sometimes falls between the cracks, and I think that's one of the main purposes of this workshop is to help folks learn that process to try to get more out of their money for sure.
Yeah, especially on the bigger projects. Yeah, I think leveraging is great. Yeah.
What is the timing as far as your RFP process and then when your applications go out and when they're due, and then in terms of when the money's actually available for reimbursement after your contracts are executed?
Well, we have to wait. Marine Fisheries, we wait until the Notice of Funding Opportunity is released by the Department of Interior to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So everything that we do is dependent on that release of the funding opportunity. We typically see that, we will typically see something about June. It could be earlier in May. It could be as late as July. I would say June is the average. Once we see the Notice of Funding Opportunity released, then we will prepare. We've already started preparing the RFP that we will be releasing in our news releases. So that usually comes out, we can't pinpoint it, early July or so is when people can look for that. Then we try to give applicants 45 to 60 days to prepare their application, which we normally see that under the Notice of Funding Opportunity, their deadline is early September for applications. So we like to give ourselves about 30 days to review, rank, and any questions we may have in there, about 30 days. So you're looking at release of RFP around the end of June, applicants due to Marine Fisheries early to mid-August at the latest. Applications due to the federal government, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, early September. We do not, after that time, we don't hear anything usually until about March of the following year if a project is funded. From that time, it's really dependent on the project itself, how long it takes to get the money, because there's a lot of compliance that can come in with the project. And a small project like the fuel pumps would not have as much compliance. So, of course, their money would be in a little bit quicker. Say a marina that has many docks that they're building, transient docks, there could be tons of compliance that they have to meet on different levels, both federal and state compliance, and there's a state contract that has to be put together. So we could look at months to a year or so to actually see the funding based on the compliance. Mm-hmm. It's not a quick process, I can tell you that. It is a process. Yeah. So,
do you have what's your application process generally? Do you have a pre-application followed up with a final app? Or
So we don't have a pre-application process. It's an application process. We receive the applications. Within our RFP, we have written what we expect to see in these applications. It's pretty detailed, pretty specific what we expect to see, the order of the application, the things we don't want to have to put together the application for the applicant. We don't want to do anything that will create an inequity between applicants. So if we have an applicant submit something that is not put together well, it is not our job to put it together for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to have this great application. We're pretty specific on what we expect to see. We do require all elements of the RFP to be addressed. If it's something minor missing, we may contact an applicant, but we expect to see all of the major elements addressed in all of our applications. From the time that we receive the application, if there is an award made, if the application and the project is awarded by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, then there's a contract process from there. So people can't start work until the contract process goes through. I hope I answered that question.
Yeah. It looks like we got about 10 minutes left. So why don't we pull up that site plan again that we've been working off of as an example with the other grants, and maybe take a look at it and just kind of tell us what would qualify under the big program. And then after that, I guess we'll open the field for some questions. And I see that there's some also in the chat box, I believe.
Yeah, okay. So looking at this site plan, I made a few notes on it on what could be eligible. The transient docks for sure. Again, though, as long as they met the eligibility requirements of being dedicated docks, 26 foot and greater, 15 days or less. But sure, the transient docks, the sewage pump out, that could be eligible, but we typically recommend that be done, that applicants go through the Division of Coastal Management for sewage pump out. They manage those programs. Not that it would be ineligible, just that we recommend they go through DCM. The bulkhead, it would be prorated. There could be a small portion of the bulkhead could possibly be eligible, but again, we would be looking at prorations on something like that. I think there was a question about site planning. Again, some of the site planning it was under a proration, some kind of proration for the total cost of the project could possibly be funded. I see there's restrooms. I think I saw restrooms and showers. Yes, restrooms and showers. Usually what we'll see there in a project like this project here has a lot of different elements to it, a lot of different usage. Different people would be using a site like this, so we would expect to see some kind of proration for restrooms, showers, and laundry, or even dedicated transient-only areas. And I think that was, the picnic shelter, the parking lot would not be eligible, playground area. The walkways, we don't fund walkways or sidewalks or parking lots. So really, the transient boat docks, that's pretty clear, and some of the restrooms, showers, and laundry, and possibly some of the site design and planning, permitting. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to me like I think we partnered maybe with a project maybe in Charlotte's district in Elizabeth City, somewhere on the coast where the transient showers and whatnot were basically set aside as for a transient only. I kind of remember that now.
Yeah, and ideally that's what we'd love to see, and that's what Fish and Wildlife Service loves to see, where it's dedicated to the transient boating community. Mm-hmm. And was there another part to that? Was that? Yeah. So I think that's it on that, what would be eligible. Even the fishing pier, that would, yeah. Most of this project would not be eligible under boating infrastructure.
Good. Whitney, do we have any questions? I'm looking over at the...
Yeah, we do have some questions. Charlene makes a clarification that the Public Beach and Coastal Waterfront Access Grant, which everyone will hear about on Tuesday, has been used to match a Big P grant in the past, which was before your time, Vicki, just FYI.
Okay.
Sharon has a question. How many awards were made in North Carolina last year through the Big P?
Last year, we did not make any awards, and we don't know, there's a question about COVID. We don't know if maybe somehow COVID affected even the amount of applications we received or interest in the project. We're not sure. But last year, there were no awards.
Thanks. Zofia makes a great point in the chat box that you'll probably note that the timelines for all of these different funding programs are highly variable. So we did put together a document as a resource for you to look at. So check that out. Thank you, Sophia, for that. Karen Dunn would like to know, would a mooring field be eligible?
I think it would be something that we would have to look at the entire project. Yeah, there's so many elements that we have to sometimes fit it all together, see how it fits. So I really wouldn't be able to say if it would or not.
So maybe Karen
can I ask a follow-up question?
Yep, go ahead, Sophia.
I was going to make your exact same point, that this is a great situation in which you could ask the funder well ahead of time. Because if the answer is no, you're saving yourself a ton of time.
That's exactly right, yes. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Sophia. And then there is a question from Charlene. Is there a minimum water depth requirement for the transient boat docks?
8 feet. Yes.
All right, that's clear.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Mike, are we done with the interview questions?
I think so, unless anyone else has any questions. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we have one more in the chat box from Paula. We have a transient dock with the addition of a restroom, shower, laundry facility to our visitor center within walking distance be considered?
It could be considered. I would say it could be considered. We'd have to look at the details of the project, really. But I think it would definitely be something that could be considered. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Vicki, any other final thoughts about the program before we switch gears?
I would say, I've heard some really great points here. Plan. 4 to 6 weeks is not a lot of time to pull together a project like a project, not for what we expect to see. And sometimes it shows. Good planning really shows when we look at these applications. So I would just say plan. Budget narrative is so important. We see some that we're guessing. What are they paying for? What is match? What's not match? And our guesses, are not good. We need to be able to see it. We need very concise projects that we can look and see exactly what people are asking for. Sometimes we're we're looking, so what are they trying to do? We're not real clear. But I think plan your project, plan how you're going to spend the money, have your supporters, and don't be afraid to access any resources that are available that we provide, including our office or our people. Maybe not our office. Mom is available. Not our office, but anyway, okay.
Vicki, one more question in the chat box. Is there a project status reporting requirement, for example, how the dollars are spent after the grant is awarded and during project execution?
Yes, there is. There's a project status, both sides, we're required to report on performance reporting and also financial reporting. So that's throughout the life of the project, and then final reporting, of course, on what was paid for, pictures. We send pictures to Fish and Wildlife Service in our final report. But yes, there is project reporting required. Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that's true for most of the funding projects that we're hearing about through this grant project. All right. Thank you so much, Vicki and Mike, for running that session. I'm going to turn it back over to Sophia. You're muted, Sophia.
Thanks, Whitney. One last thing that I wanted to say in terms of planning, just to reiterate it, and I put this in the chat box, but your current self and staff, so like your current team, is your future team's most important collaborator. And so if you set yourself up for success by really thoroughly planning things, if and when you're awarded the funding, having that detailed plan to go back and reference is going to be invaluable. Okay, so we are going to go into breakout rooms in a minute, but not yet. So what we're going to do, hopefully a week ago, Whitney sent out some homework, and it's a mock pre-proposal that I think Rachel and Charlene put together for us. And we're going to go over the answers together. But on our last interview of the day, I'm going to be interviewing Pat Durrett.
And Pat is with the Division of Coastal Management. She manages the North Carolina Clean Marina Program, and she's going to talk to us about the North Carolina Pump Out Grant Program. So, Pat, are you there?
I am.
Great, thank you. So our first question is, I think, a pretty easy one to answer. What do you fund, and can you share an example project? And I'm going to open your pictures here.
Okay. Yes, I'm the Clean Vessel Act program, and so we fund pump outs, the construction of it, renovation of them, planning, engineering, but they're pump outs for boats, for recreational boats, so that we can get the waste out of our water and keep everything a whole lot cleaner. We fund pump out boats. We actually have two of them now. One is in Carolina Beach, Port City Marina, and one is in Wrightsville Beach. They're very, very good to have because it gets those places that are, those vessels that are moored that sometimes don't get loose to go over and pump out like they should. And then the next picture is of a pump out station. So you've got the stanchion here and your hose, so they just come up and pump out. This is the sign you look for when you're out and about on the waterway and want to pump out. So our funding we get from the Clean Vessel Act, Dingell-Johnson Sportfish Restoration Act, and that's through the Department of Interior and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. That's where that comes from.
Great. And how much money is available?
Okay, our money it's not always the same. We have to do just like you do. We have to apply for a grant and see if we're going to get it. So we never know for sure if all of it's going to be funded. So far, we've been very, very fortunate. Our funding lasts for a period of 3 years. We'll get one grant. Right now, we have probably in excess of $180,000 left until the 23rd of 2023. And we were just awarded a new one that starts in, our grants run from October 1st to September 29th, and they're 3 years long. So it's very, very handy that way because we're on a rolling calendar, and you're not under as big a time constraint as you were with all of the other funding time frames that you have to meet.
Thanks, Pat. And let's back it up for just a second. We do have a question in the chat box. What is a pump out, and what are we pumping out?
Okay. A pump out is, you've got a boat and it's got a bathroom on it, or as they say in the marine world, the head. And that bathroom needs to be pumped out so you can get that wastewater out of the water instead of going out and just opening a valve and dumping it into our waterways, which is what happens a lot of times. So we're hoping to provide boaters with just as good access as gas so they can go in and get their vessels pumped out and thereby cleaning up our waterways.
Right, keeping that essentially raw sewage out of our local creeks and estuaries.
Correct.
Thanks, Pat. Can you briefly describe the RFP and elements expected in a proposal?
Okay, ours is a little bit different than what you've been having to do. We send out notices just saying that we have money available. It might be through a public notice or something that says, we now have money available. We put on seminars that tell people that money's out there. So all you have to do at that point is submit an application. So you don't have to really go through all kinds of proposals. up front, a pre-application or anything. You just send in your actual application.
Great. Are there match requirements or limits on match?
There are. Our grants are good for a maximum of $20,000. We will give out 75%. The government pays for. The grantee is required to pay the 25% match. They can do that through cash or in-kind services, but in-kind services they really have to show when they submit for payment.
This may not apply to this program, but is there anything related to leveraging money for multiple grant sources? And do you know if your grant program has been leveraged with others in the past?
I know that I have seen a couple of places where they put ours in as a separate grant request. If you go to that schematic where it shows, you know, when Vicki was talking about the big program, the boating infrastructure grant program, and on that schematic you have, it shows the pump out area. A lot of times they will put that separately and ask for that money separate, so they could get $20,000 to put their pump out in, and they don't need to use that for any of their other grant money. So you've got your transient boat docks with a sewage pump out there, and they could do that one separately from, say that they were trying to get the boardwalk or the kayak launch or the boat ramps or whatever. So if they indicate that that's going to be used solely for the sewage pump out, and then any other grants that they request, they would have to say that they were requesting money from the CVA grant for that amount.
Great, thank you. So can you talk a little bit about the RFP and the proposal submission and the funding allocation timing?
Okay. Well, like I said, there's not a formal RFP. The application is strictly just the first, when you send in the application, that's it. We don't do a pre-proposal submission. So what they do is fill out an application, completed application, which is the big item that you have, and I guess all of us have to deal with that review grants, is making sure that they addressed all of the items in the grant application. And it's really pretty concise and asks for certain things and tells you what you need to do. And I can give you a copy of what to do to get a grant so you can make it available for everybody, but it will walk everybody through the process step by step and how it's going to happen and what you can expect. But once you send in your application, then it's reviewed. So there's not a real big deal with timing. As long as you're going to have that pump out built and operational by the end of our grant cycle. So if we're trying to take money out of a grant that finishes up on September 29th or September 30th, whatever, of 2021, then you would need to submit your application in time, knowing that you've got to give yourself 2 or 3 weeks for it to go through, be approved, get your contract, and at that point, you can start doing some construction. One of the things that we want to make clear with anybody that tries to get a pump out grant is that you do absolutely no work, construction, purchases, or anything until you have completed, received a fully executed contract. And so once you get that fully executed contract, which may take 2 weeks or more, once you get that, then you can begin purchasing everything and going through. So if you would just have to complete that construction by September 29th of 2021, if we were using monies from that one. If we're using monies from another grant, then you would have maybe longer, all the way until 2023 to complete it.
Whitney, this is Rachel. I just wanted to let you know you have about 10 minutes.
Thanks, Rachel. So we've already talked about the application process, and we know there's no pre-app. Is there any COVID impacts that you're aware of to the funding source?
Only, I think the biggest thing would be our travel, getting out to look at the sites. When they fill out an application, they need to put maps and a picture of where they're going to put it, because one of the things is that they have to be easily accessible by the recreational boaters. So you can't put the pump out on a dock that's stuck back in a corner somewhere where nobody can get access to it. So they have to, the regional offices have to review, the CAMA regional offices review that request when they get it. So I'll show them the map where they've said they're going to put it and ask if that is adequate. And they usually look at the permits and see, you know, what's there, what's been submitted, and whether or not it will be okay. And then after that, then the once they've completed the pump out, then travel back out to the site to make sure it's fully functional and installed where they said they were going to install it. So I think travel is the biggest thing right now for field staff. For the folks out in the field that are building it and all, I haven't seen a lot where it's been significantly, where it's caused any significant delays.
This is a separate question I had. Is there any sort of requirement for maintaining the pump out over a certain time period? Like once you get those funds, you have to make sure that pump out is in working order for a period of time or so.
Yes, there is, and that's all in your contract. But when you get a pump out contract, if it's a like one that's on the dock or a portable one, those have to be maintained and operated for a period of 5 years, fully functional for 5 years. The most that anybody can charge would be $5 for a pump out if they've got those funds, our funds. If they have built a pump out boat, then this is all based on useful life, and so the pump out boat is a 10-year contract. They have to maintain it for 10 years.
Great, thanks. I assume you are the main contact for the pump out program, so if anyone has questions, they can contact you directly?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And we'll put together a list of all the funders and the other contacts that we've assembled today and make sure those are available for everyone after the workshop. And we've already talked about the site plan. So my last question for you is, do you have any grant management tips for those that are awarded funding?
I think keeping track of all of their receipts and their canceled checks and the way, whenever they purchase anything, that's a big thing. So the way our grant works is probably like the rest of you. Ours is a one-time lump sum payment, unlike I think some of the others go in phases, but ours was a one-time lump sum payment. So whenever you complete the construction of your pump out, then you can request payment. You submit an invoice along with all of your receipts, canceled checks, and justifications if you do in kind, all of the pay stubs and things like that. So keeping track of that, I think, is paramount for the grantees.
Thanks. And we do have a question in the chat box from Cindy. She wants to know, are vessel owners somehow enforced to perform a pump out?
It depends on if there's a lot of pump outs that are out there that were not constructed with our funds. There's nothing that says they have to do it at that point. If they were constructed with our funds, then they have to be available during reasonable hours, normal working hours. And if someone is outside of that time, they would, they can refuse doing it. But if it's during normal working business hours, then they're supposed to. If they don't, then they can contact us and let us know that they're not allowing that. And we can contact the grantee and say, look, if you're not going to follow the rules of the contract because it says it has to be accessible, then you can pay us back the money. So there is a way to encourage them to do things the right way.
And we do have another question in the chat box. Does your grant pay for the connection between the pump out and an on-site septic system? Can the grant contribute toward the on-site septic system?
Okay, we will. Yes, it will pay for the connection to the on-site. If you can get the county to allow you to go to your on-site system. That's the issues that we have been having with on-site. The counties and the Division of Waste Management doesn't want to allow septage from pump outs to be put into normal septic tanks because the concentration is much higher than normal domestic wastewater. So whenever you're looking at them putting it into a septic site, we would just need the county's approval saying, in part of your application, you have to indicate where the wastewater is going to be going. So you have to say whether it's going to an on-site system or whether it's going to a city sewer. And if it's going to the city sewer, then you have to get a letter from them saying that they'll accept it. If it's going to your on-site system, then you'll need something from the county saying they allow it to go into the on-site system. We will help pay for the connection. If the county says, yes, we'll allow it to go into the on-site system, but it needs to have another tank or a holding tank to put it in there to feed it slowly, then we'll help pay for that as well. We don't pay for the septic site system itself, though, unless it needs to be enlarged to handle the added wastewater.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, Pat. I just want to point everyone's attention to the chat box. Zofia had a comment about being mindful about delays of contracts. So that's a good thing to think about. Be mindful of internal review deadlines that your organization might have for approving budgets and other things. And for example, UNC has an internal procedure for submitting proposals to the university. So her deadline to get the proposal in is really way before the deadline of the actual grant applicant to the funder. So with that, I want to thank everyone for their time and attention. Thank all of my team members putting this workshop together. Thank all of the funders who allowed us to interview them today. We really appreciate the information. If